welcome to the Full Scottish here on Broadcasting Scotland. I'm Kenny McBride, and joining me at the desk today is Jeanette Foggo. How are you, Jeanette?
I'm all right, thank you. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, our first story today is about some people who are not feeling quite so well. This is in China, where the death toll from the coronavirus epidemic has now reached 811, which passes the number killed by the SARS epidemic in 2002-2003. This comes as millions of people across China are due to go back to work tomorrow following an extended New Year break. There are still some companies not going back, there are still schools going to be closed all over the country, and a lot of people are still being encouraged to work from home. So Jeanette, this coronavirus, this has been an ongoing story for a wee while, and one of the questions I've been asking everybody when we've talked about this is, do you get the feeling that this is something where China has just acted quickly, tried to close down the epidemic as quickly as possible? Or do you get the feeling that maybe there's something bigger going on that we're not hearing about?
I don't know. I was incredibly impressed by the speed with which they built that hospital. Kind of like a whole hospital in kind of, you know, an afternoon kind of. I think, to be honest with you, from what I know about viruses, which is remarkably little, that it's once a virus starts to spread, then there's not necessarily, it's not something that you have complete human agency over, that you can just go, okay, we'll stop that. I think they do seem to have done what they can. I think in the case of like this, the Dr. Li Wenliang, who I understand has now died himself of the disease, I'm not quite sure how, you know, what one understands a lot about China is that they are very into the kind of like a positive promotion of their image, of a positive image of themselves. And so the idea that this disease could be happening there, they might well have tried to shut that down. They've also, you know, where SARS came out of China, so many of these things historically have come that way from the East. But it is a country with a huge, an inconceivably huge population compared to most other countries that we might visit. So how they might contain that, it seemed, I don't know, I mean, I'm not a virologist, so I can't say. I think this seems now to be fairly kind of active measures to prevent it. But a virus is like nature, it kind of, you know, it will do what it does, and some transmit very readily, some don't. This one seems to be a bit more contagious than they thought it was. I think I was reading yesterday some cases in France now of people who have not been to China, and it's so. What can I say about kind of what is a government which is relatively concealed from public eye? You know, it's about what their discussions might be. I suspect they may well have tried to kind of shut down the transmission of too much information, but we also know that if you're dealing with a public health issue, you have to put out information, and they're concerned about public panic. If it happens during a massive holiday where nobody's at work, you might hope that kind of within a week or two it might subside, so it would be okay, you know. It's
yeah, I mean, certainly the fact that it happened right at the time of the New Year has been a particular problem because so many people are travelling. That has been a problem, and obviously as well, it seems that people are able to infect others before they start showing symptoms themselves, which obviously poses a huge problem. As you say, the doctor who first identified the virus has now died, which obviously is extremely sad. The Chinese, there's been reports on Weibo, the Chinese equivalent of Twitter. People are not happy. The Chinese people are speaking up about this. Talking about why should we go back to work when we can't buy face masks anywhere. The country's run short of face masks. People saying pretty much the kind of thing that we're maybe suggesting here is what's even more frustrating is that these are only the official data. There is a knowledge of the people in China that their government doesn't always tell them the truth about things, and certainly that's one of the concerns. As you say, though, the response of the Chinese government has been really incredible. That, as you say, that hospital that was thrown up in 6 days, you know, it's it's just inconceivable that something like that could happen in this country. If we had an outbreak of something here that required a lot of hospital spaces, there's no way we could.
And I also you wonder about that in that sense that a Chinese government or the government in that area is possibly less limited by public bodies that need to investigate, inquire, kind of make sure that they can just say we need a hospital. There's a hospital, you know, and having you know, that kind of massive workforce available. It's but I mean. It's not. I was doing a thing last week, and it's with somebody working with people, and one of the people I was working with had a guest who was coming from China and had to rearrange their accommodations and stuff because of the potential health risk to family and stuff. So I think it's quite a complicated, you know, for people in this country. If they have family members who may be at risk of serious illness, you know, do they have concerns about, I mean, how this is being dealt with here, even with people travelling? I mean, we had tremendous difficulty getting our own citizens out of China.
Yeah,
our government were very slow to do that, and
yeah, with the last evacuation flight from Wuhan, which is the province where this has happened, landed today. There was 200 people on board. That's the last flight that's expected to be evacuating people. I mean, we have been relatively lucky. There have obviously been quite a large number of people in China that did need to be brought home. But we've only had a handful of cases in Britain. There's 5 British nationals in France just now who have all been infected. And we are starting to see some person-to-person transmission, as you said, people who are outside, people who have never been to China suddenly being infected now. So there is obviously a concern, but I guess we just have to hope that, you know, that enough people know about it now. Enough people are being checked as they come into the country. We're out, you know, and this is happening all over the world. That we can hopefully contain it as closely as we can. As the death toll, I mean, it's only 811 people from total confirmed cases in China of almost 38,000. You know, it's not a massive death toll, but clearly it's still
massive
something.
If you're one of the 811, you know.
Well, exactly. It's still a really big problem.
I mean, to be honest, I don't know what the actual statistics are in terms of like a virus. You know what the percentages of people infected to mortality rate normally are, but I think in any like public health situation where you have a huge population of people, many of whom where they live close to each other, the cities are very densely populated, etc. You are almost certainly that virus is going to spread, and it's going to spread fairly rapidly, I would think. And so in the end, I think from what I understand about virology, the most interesting people are the people who either don't get it having been in contact, or the people who get it and recover, because then, you know, if I don't start looking at what it is about them, that means that they didn't get so ill, or that they didn't die.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem, and again, we don't necessarily have all the information, but we have heard that the majority of the people who have died have been people who already were compromised in some way, people who were perhaps very old, very young, or had some other kind of underlying condition. So I guess we just have to hope that this has been contained as well as it can. We will obviously keep a kind of watching brief on it. But we do have to move on. There's a lot of other things happening in the world. And this week has been a big week in the US. Donald Trump was acquitted on Wednesday in his trial on impeachment charges. The only Republican who voted to condemn him was Mitt Romney. That was something that was somewhat unexpected. Mitt Romney had been concerned, certainly, and had said that he was going to try to be impartial, unlike most of the other Republicans. But now we've seen that Trump has started to take revenge. He's sacked Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman from the National Security Council, this well-respected officer who had been one of the people to testify against him, or to give evidence against him in the House. He didn't obviously get to testify in the Senate because it was not a real trial. What's your feeling about this whole situation?
I think the whole thing with Trump is a bit like Brexit and a bit like Boris Johnson, is that people go, we won, that's it, we won. Mm-hmm. So that feeling is a good feeling. And the actual evidence around all of this is so complex about whether he, you know, made bribes or offers to Ukrainians, you know. It is a bit like Watergate, kind of the evidence and going through the thing about Watergate and kind of going like, gee, it's just so detailed. I think for me, the big issue about the Senate and the not calling witnesses is, as I understand it, American law is pretty much like, particularly English law, is very based on precedent. Mm-hmm. So you're now established actually that the founding fathers put in place this thing about impeaching the president, which was about saying the president, like every other citizen of the state, is subject to the law. Mm-hmm. And may not use his office for personal gain, personal advancement. You have now in the Senate established a precedent which says that's not the case. The president can basically kind of do what they like. We don't need to call witnesses. We don't need to seek the truth. We can just kind of go, we'll have a vote on what it looks like now. Mm-hmm. Mitt Romney, I almost felt sorry for Mitt Romney in that he's a bit like Ken Clarke and Philip Hammond on the Brexit issue. You kind of go, oh my God, they're heroes because of how they voted. Then you go, hang on. Ken Clarke was one of the architects of the whole Thatcher revolution, the whole thing state. Mitt Romney is not a man that I would vote for, do you know? But in this one moment of conscience where he's kind of gone, actually, he has expressed, as did Ken Clarke, Philip Hammond, he has expressed something that says there is something greater than just us here in this moment. Mm-hmm. And he's now probably going to be punished and vilified for that, as are other people. The problem then is that you then do create a politics where you say nothing matters but winning. Yeah. And you abandon discourse, you abandon wisdom, you abandon actually listening to what it is that makes people so unhappy that they will accept anything for the pleasure of feeling like they won. Mm-hmm. And I mean, you see lots of things about Donald Trump looking at, like, you know, his psychology. Is he mentally stable? You know, things about his mother. I've made jokes on Facebook and Twitter to American friends apologising on behalf of my nation to theirs. But what you do see is a man with this terrific hubris, and who has now basically been told, yeah, it's all right, you can do what you like, because we are so in love with the notion of a president like a king. It suddenly becomes much more like you have now invested a king at the head of your state, an emperor, because you have put somebody who, by some, in some notion, is above the law, is above investigation. Yeah,
and I mean that's one of the things that's most worrying, I think, is that the Republicans have always claimed to be the party of the Constitution. It was always the Democrats who were trying to give government more power than it should have and trying to make the presidency into an overly powerful institution. And yet this time it's been the Republican Party has shown itself to be totally captured by Trumpism. There is nobody apart from Mitt Romney in the Senate who was willing to even vote for a fair trial. And that's one of the things that I think is most disturbing about it, is that they didn't even want to have the pretense of a trial. Yeah. They knew how they were going to vote. They all knew how they were going to vote, but they were openly saying, we're not going to be impartial jurors here. We're cooperating with we're coordinating, in fact, with the White House on how the trial is going to be structured, what the trial strategy is going to be. And this, as you said, the Constitution is designed to balance the power of the president, the power of the Congress, and the Supreme Court is there to kind of figure out how that fits with the Constitution. And yet now the Congress has essentially said, or the Senate rather, has essentially said, we're not putting any checks on this man. And I mean, there have been people saying, you know, this is the beginning of a slide into straightforward fascism. Do you think that's overblown, or do you think that's a real concern?
I think democracy is a very fragile thing. And it's interesting when you see, like post the war in Iraq, etc., people kind of get democracy. You know, we're going to bring you democracy. And people believing that democracy means you get what you want. Well, no, it doesn't. It means you get to vote for what you want, but it doesn't mean that you will get it. And it's a very fragile thing if you don't understand that. If you don't allow yourself to go, this is about, it's a bit like the thing about whether we should have another referendum. That debate is about whether we are entitled to a referendum. What the outcome of that referendum is a different thing. So I think my feeling about what's happening in the States, and to a certain extent what's happening here, is that people are starting to interpret democracy as getting what you want, whatever the price. I suspect that what's happened in the Senate is that senators have been shown evidence, and they may well, in some distorted sense of honour, going, if we are seen to hear that evidence, there's no way that we can then put our hands up and say not guilty. Because if we hear that evidence, it's all public. Everybody hears that evidence. So the only way out of this is to not hear that evidence. It's for that evidence to be in some way suppressed. So we're just going to go, we don't need witnesses because we have faith in this man. Whether they actually do have faith, or whether it's just like, you know, jobs for the boys. Kind of like, if I do that, I'm, you know, will I get voted? Will the public vote for me again? There's a huge, there doesn't seem to be, Trump doesn't seem to have lost any of his own vote, his own support. I think his figures stay relatively stable. So all he needs to do is win the same votes as he won last time. Do you know? I mean, I'm not an expert on American constitutional history or indeed anything else. But I kind of watching it, it's like I often watch things with an actor's eye, kind of like, if this was a script that was handed to me, what would I be looking for? What would be my reasoning? You know,
for the president
well,
would be a good start.
absolutely, and certainly better makeup. But actually, what would I be looking for as a clue in how I would present this character or be one of these senators? And my feeling is always, if you always kind of look behind the line, and my feeling about the Senate is maybe they're going like, we can't actually let this evidence be heard in public and then say not guilty because it's so obviously not the case. So our only option is to not hear the evidence. So, you know, it's to not call witnesses.
So given that kind of everybody basically knew that if Trump was impeached, that the trial would not succeed, that he wouldn't actually be removed from office. That was always what was assumed would happen, and that is what's happened. So do you think it was a mistake for the Democrats to bring the impeachment at all?
I don't know. I think maybe it was the difference of the two impeachment. Like there's been Nixon and Clinton, and then there was
Johnson.
Well,
Nixon technically wasn't impeached. He resigned before he could be.
But he resigned. But the process was underway. Clinton was running out of time because he was in his second phase of office anyway. I think the problem with the Trump is that people not taking into account there's no way Trump would ever resign. No matter, I'm pretty sure you could run a video of him doing all the things he's talked about, and he wouldn't resign. He would kind of just shout. And because of establishing it very clearly, I mean, I look at things that friends of mine, American friends of mine, who I'm not particularly friends with now on Facebook, etc., and they have a lot of them have just tipped over into this kind of constant lunatic fringe thing about fake news. So if so many people who I thought used to think were reasonable and rational and that you could have a discussion with are doing fake news, and digging up all these stuff from, like, you know, page 2005 on Google, then that convicts his ability to say fake news, and people go, yeah, it's fake news, is now so established that there's no way I think that he would ever resign, and he has another possibly another 4 years of him as president. Maybe if they'd have waited till after an election, when he was going to be gone anyway at the end of that. But I don't know if you feel that somebody is being profoundly damaging to your country, if you feel that they've behaved in a way that is illegal, if you believe that. I'm guessing Nancy Pelosi and all the committees, they saw all this evidence. I don't think that a Congress puts a president through this lightly. I don't think they just took, oh, let's just do it, you know. And every single president that's ever been in my lifetime, people talk about, oh, maybe we need to impeach them for what, you know, because they kind of, you know, spat in the street or something to us. I don't think a Congress goes through this whole process lightly. And I think they may have thought that it kind of, conversely to what I was just saying, they may have thought it was the only way to prevent a second term, which might ultimately be more damaging, because if it's a second term, there will be no consequences to Donald Trump. He'll do it. He's made all his money out of it, and he'll go off and build his library with 3 books in it, and you know,
probably all just
and use the fact
him.
that he was once president for the rest of his life to kind of
as a way to make a lot more money.
Yeah,
I mean, because ex-presidents are entitled to things like CIA briefings for the rest of their lives. You know, he's going to have a lot of knowledge that other businessmen in his field wouldn't know. Now, you mentioned Nancy Pelosi. At the State of the Union, which happened this week as well, Nancy Pelosi tore up the speech. She was handed a copy of the speech, and then while Trump was facing away from her, she tore it up. I don't know if you saw this.
Yeah, I did, yeah.
Do you think that helps the Democrat cause, or do you think that just riles up the other side and
do you know,
makes it look like a sort of petty
we're kind of living now in a kind of age of unwisdom, aren't we, where people are just so pushed, so angry. I kind of watched that, and there's a part of me kind of going, never ask an old woman what she's angry about. Everything. And you kind of go, it would be marvellous. We always kind of go, so to be absolutely dignified and say, oh, thank you, Mr. President. And I will certainly put that in a frame in my desk drawer. But there's another part of you goes, yeah, tear it up. Because we actually now, we all know, can I say bollocks on this? We all know it's all kind of bollocks. Do you know what I mean? It's, and actually somebody just going, I've had it. And she's quite elderly herself. You know, she's not necessarily going to be there for like, you know, a million years more. And it might just be that, we were talking about this in, you know, before we started, this thing about people being human. And there just comes a point, I suppose, where somebody who's a very long career, pretty respected career, she's been Speaker of, you know, the House of Representatives, all, that you maybe just kind of go, do you know what, this is just one step of bullshit too far. I'm going to do it. Or maybe it is a great symbolic gesture. Do you know, Michael Heseltine grabbing the mace, Cromwell in Parliament, do you know. Maybe it is just for her, it's just a symbolic gesture of, all right, I'm going to demonstrate that what we all know.
Yeah.
Do you know?
Of course, the Democrats just now are competing to decide who's going to face Trump in November. They had their debate in New Hampshire after the chaos in Iowa on Monday, where we've only just finally got some actual results. And even those are there's going to have to be a recount and everything. But the debates happened on Friday, and again, a lot of it turned to, you know, how can we beat Trump? People talking about Trump. And one candidate, Andrew Yang, a candidate I've had a real interest in, he has been arguing for months and months that whenever we're talking about Trump, Trump is winning. Regardless of what we're talking about, regardless if it's Trump's the worst president who's ever lived, and detailing all the terrible things he's done, the more oxygen of publicity we give to him, the worse we do in trying to beat him. So do you think maybe there is a case for us just not talking about him anymore, just ignoring all his ridiculous tweets, Or do you think, like the argument about the impeachment, that it's so egregious, he's so bad, that even if it's going to cost you politically, you still have to fight every step of the way?
He's kind of, well, I think I would, to say anything, I would agree. So just ignore him. Just make, but because this kind of like primary event goes on for so long, and because they're all competing with each other so publicly to become, you know, the Democrat candidate, I think that it becomes difficult to just go, well, we'll all just ignore Trump. The best thing maybe they could do is all get together in a room and go, okay, realistically, let's kind of put aside personal feelings, let's put aside whatever, oh, Joe Biden or whatever, just like put everything aside and sit down in a room and say, who do we actually think the American people will vote for? Who do we really think that person's going to be? And set aside, you know, our feelings of sexism or racism or whatever. Who do we think that man or woman is going to be? Right, now our problem is, what we need to solve is how we make that person our candidate and how we focus on that person addressing what has happened in the country for the last 4 years and what their plan for the next 4 years would be. And in that case, you maybe can go, but like we're going to not talk about Trump as the kind of idiot man he is, actually going to say, do you know what, so how many coal mines have actually reopened in Virginia?
Yeah.
Do you know, let's talk about that. What has happened to the price of steel? How many small companies have closed down because of the steel tariffs, because they can't manufacture now? Let's really genuinely, because talk about healthcare. Let's actually talk about the fact that diabetics in the United States can be on a copay, can be paying $500 a month for insulin, which they're then giving through a hypodermic syringe. And I look at that when I see these things, and I think about, you know, people I know who have type 1 diabetes, type 1 diabetes, and they have, like, you know, insulin pens, smart meters, podiatry, all of that kind of thing. Have a proper focus campaign. Go into those states that of where the extremely poor people vote for Trump. Face to face with those people and say, okay, your child, what's your insurance? How much does your insurance policy cost you a month? Now, I see things where people talking about the insurance policy is $800 or $1,000 a month if they're married and they've got, like, you know, a couple of kids. Say, okay, if you did it as we do, now our health service is not perfect. And nor are any of the other European ones with basically state health care. But if we were to say to you, okay, your taxes will be $200 a month more than they are at the moment, but you will never again, ever have to worry about seeing a doctor and getting treatment.
Yeah. I mean,
ever, whatever goes wrong with you. If you were a homeless person, you can walk into an A&E unit and you will get treated. Think about that, because you still have your $500 or $600 a month more to actually spend in your economy. Because that's the other thing, all that money that's going to insurance companies for healthcare is not actually going into their economy as money gets spent in shops and stuff. And actually, that would be my recommendation: is get out there, just choose I don't know, Elizabeth Warren, whoever, choose a candidate, and then get out there and actually get face to face with people in groups, in town halls, and you know.
Yeah, I mean, they're facing something of a similar issue that happened in the Labour Party in this country, where Bernie Sanders, who describes himself as a socialist, democratic socialist, I should stress, but he describes himself as a socialist, which is quite unusual in American politics. He's currently the front runner, but there are people in the Democratic Party who will do anything to stop him becoming president. Hillary Clinton, who has described Trump as the most dangerous man alive, hesitated when asked if she would support Bernie Sanders if he got the nomination. So is there a problem there? And again, like I say, it's the same thing that happened in the Labour Party. Jeremy Corbyn won, and people in his own party were effectively saying the Tories are better than this. Do you think that's something that we just have to that we have to kind of figure out who our enemies, who the real enemy is? And
I say this all the time on Facebook, Twitter. I'm like, actually. With the kind of the whole sort of thing about, like, attacking the SNP, the obsessive thing about the SNP, the obsessive thing going, do you know what? Do you actually understand who your real enemy is? For my money, that's the Tories, do you know? And I think it's the same in the United States. And I mean, as I said, I think the major thing with people talking about economy and about jobs, the main thing I see when I'm looking on Twitter, Facebook, all those things, is people's big concerns are exactly the same as people's big concerns here, which is their jobs. Are their jobs secure? Their terrible minimum. I mean, the minimum wage across the United States, because I'm also one of those neurotic people. I kind of go and look things up. You know, kind of go, oh look, we've got Google. Yeah, it's so much better than when I was at school. So the minimum wage, when you convert it, you suddenly go, the minimum wage in a lot of states in the United States is equivalent of about £5 or £6 an hour. And so you're saying, okay, well, with our kind of sort of slightly socialist notion, which is now being dismantled here, our minimum wage is much more now. Our minimum wage is, I know it's about £8.50 an hour now.
I can't remember exactly.
£7.80 going up. It's in people working in, as providers of care, etc., get a bit more. So actually looking at that, sort of talking to American voters, saying, do you understand how low your minimum wage is compared to a worker doing the same job in Germany or Britain or whatever? And they get all this other provision. They pay a little bit more tax, but they get free education. The other thing is free education. Well, it's not free in England, but it is in Scotland still.
And everywhere else in Europe, yeah.
And so I would say it's having a kind of, instead of having an ideology-based argument about, or this whole kind of thing like, make America great again, make Britain great again, but actually go, okay, I'm sitting looking at you, tell me what your biggest difficulty in your life is. And I suspect a lot of people would be having a family life whilst doing 3 minimum wage jobs. Well, okay, how much easier would your family life be if you could do just 1.5 minimum wage jobs? And if you didn't have to worry about healthcare, if your kids fall off a wall because there's nobody watching them. And then that would free up 1.5 jobs for that young guy who can't get a job.
Can't get a job, yeah.
Do you know? But I think it comes down to, in the end, there has to be some point where politics is brought closer to people. Now, I know I've sometimes posted on Facebook saying that I'd emailed my, over something kind of, to put that thing, they work for us, and you put all your all your representatives on that. You say you can send them one email about an issue to every single one of them, and then you can see when you get replies. So I would say, and this one replied, this one replied, this one replied. This is what they commented, and American friends go, oh my God. Oh my God! I can't even contact a local councillor. Yeah. And I can't email a congressman or a senator. You have to write to them, or you phone their office and they're told it's on, and they never get back to you about anything. Yeah. So, well, there you go. There's one step of solution. Actually, get down and dirty. Get out there amongst people and make that. Just say that. Do you know what? Every single congressman and senator will have an email address, and it will be absolutely that they will be required to reply within 7 days.
That's that's a good step. We just need you to go and rewrite the Constitution. That's the argument there, I think. Anyway, we do have to move on.
Sorry.
And this week, it's fine. This week we heard Nicky Morgan, the Culture Secretary, talking about decriminalising non-payment of the licence fee for the BBC. She made some quite interesting arguments. She argued that the licence fee is not a model for the future. She said she pointed out something I didn't realise, which is that criminal sanctions are mostly applied to women for non-payment of the licence fee. That's something I was not aware of before reading up on this story. But this is all part of a process where the government seems to be trying to certainly drastically restructure the BBC and potentially eliminate the licence fee altogether. Now, you're an actor, you have had some experience with the BBC and various other production organisations. What's your feeling about this? Do you think this is a good idea for the BBC to move to a different funding model?
Well, first of all, I think decriminalising non-payment is a good idea. I don't understand the whole thing of criminalising people who can't pay very basic bills. You're going to go, why can't they, why is that? I mean, some people do it as a kind of political statement, but I think, I have worked for the BBC in the past, and it's as an actor, it's a good organisation to work for. It provides a huge range of services that other TV providers don't. You know, dedicated children's networks, dedicated other language, you know, Gaelic network in Scotland, their news channels, the amount of drama that they do. I'm not quite sure exactly when they say restructure, what does that mean? What would that restructuring involve? If they go to it just being a straightforward subscription channel, then I suspect it would lose a lot of money. But then I think I pay for Netflix and I pay for Now, and what that adds up to over the year, the combination of those two, is more than I pay for the BBC. And I don't watch more on those channels than I mean, what I use those as a kind of catch up on maybe films that I've missed, or, you know, box sets or whatever. But if I'm going to watch, I mean, like, just simply being able to watch Parliament when there's a big debate on, to actually kind of go, I'm going to watch this whole debate without commentary, because that's the other thing.
Of course, you can do that on Broadcasting Scotland,
but, you know,
as well.
You know, no, I suppose, yes, I know, absolutely, but I just, it's a combination of things. But I also have a concern. I mean, when they talk about people kind of conflate a little bit public broadcasting, and I know there's big issues about the BBC's presentation of news and Question Time and programmes like that, and balance, absolutely. But and they may be very careful when public broadcasting tips over into state television, which I think is what people's concern about the BBC has been, in how it presents, how it tells news stories, how it headlines them, or who it has on a Question Time panel or in the audience. And I think looking at that is more important about about impartiality, making sure that it really is a balance and it is impartial, but also that people are really questioned closely about stuff is important. But I have a certain anxiety about, and that might be because I'm quite old now, about losing the BBC, because I do think we get a huge amount from it, do you know?
Yeah, I mean, for me, obviously, one of the reasons I'm here at Broadcasting Scotland is because I have concerns about the way the BBC presents the news, particularly around Scotland, and that's something that, as you say, that has to be addressed, because that loss of trust is one of the things that is going to be exploited by anybody who wants to bring the BBC down. Of course, the BBC in recent years has been accused by even relatively independent people who don't necessarily have a dog in the fight, of being a Tory mouthpiece. We've seen specific things during the election, especially, where they had edited footage to make Boris Johnson look better. So do you think this surely isn't the Tories trying to, you know, taking out a political enemy? Do you think it's maybe just making the noises in order to scare the BBC into being even more, you know, in line with government goals?
Well, I don't. The danger with that is the Tories, it feels at the moment like they're going to be the government for probably the rest of my life, but they are not. Do you know what I mean? And so the danger for any political party, and it's a bit like going back to the whole thing about the Senate in the US, is if you change something in such a way that it will favour you as the government, you can't control that forever. So then you will end up with a state broadcaster which always favours the government. I think to change the whole structure of something because it's not impartial enough is not the solution. The solution is, can we talk about impartiality? So if you're going to have programmes like Question Time, do you always have to have the same chairperson? Could you say, okay, we're having this in Scotland, so let's have a Scotland. I mean, debate. I thought debate night actually on the BBC Scotland channel. I really enjoyed that because because it was calm. The other thing is, I kind of sit watching television and go, I'm switching this off because I just can't be bothered listening to you all shouting at each other and interrupting. I actually wanted to hear the end of that sentence. So maybe it's about talking about impartiality, and maybe it's about us all having to accept that we need to listen more, and to everybody. And maybe you could say, okay, well, we will have a different chairperson in different places if we're going to have panel discussions, and to actually make a bigger effort to understand more complexly why people make the choices that they make. Because I think the problem is the situation we've got ourselves in now is everybody's shouting at everybody else that they're stupid. Do you know, we've just got two armies yelling across the ravine, you're stupid, no, you're stupid, no, you are, do you know? And the problem is then that television politics, debate and discussion becomes that. But also I think people get on those panel things because we are so removed from our politicians now. They don't do the same amount of, I mean, I can remember as quite a young child, my dad took me down to Cooper Institute to hear Tony Benn in a panel discussion in the Cooper Institute hall by the library. And I was, I don't know, I was maybe 10, 12 at the time. So, and we don't see those people so close up now. And I think if we make maybe the answer is to be more impartial, and maybe to listen better. And, you know, and actually in the audience and everything is to have a much more open way of selecting people. And actually, if somebody's been on the programme 6 times, you kind of go, I think it's time for you not to. But then again, I think maybe people don't volunteer to be on it that much because they go, I'm going to be in public with the cameras in my face. And sometimes, you know, I've seen politicians on the panel really have a go at somebody in the audience, and you go, do you know what?
You wouldn't want to be that
She's
person.
just kind of asked you a question. The thing to do would be to go, either I don't know, I don't understand your question, or just answer it.
Yeah.
Do you know?
Yeah. Of course, we are trying to develop a programme, a question time type programme that we can tour around Scotland here at Broadcasting Scotland. So if you want to help us make that happen, if you'd like to see something from our way of doing things, you are able to support us, and we'll talk about that at the end of the show. But we are moving on now, and this is the story about Derek Mackay, who resigned as the Finance Secretary this week in a certain amount of scandal. He had sent 270 messages to this 16-year-old boy. He was accused of grooming, of being a predator. Nicola Sturgeon accepted his resignation very quickly. She said, I think the conduct is unacceptable and I will not make any attempt to say otherwise or to minimise in any way its seriousness. Based on what I knew about this last night, it was clear to me then that Derek Mackay's conduct fell far short of what is expected of a minister. Now, there have been some stories come out since then that the SNP had tried to stop publication of the story. The Scottish Government had tried to stop publication of the story. But what we've actually seen from that email was that they had expressed a concern about intrusion into private and family life. They wanted to know that the messages had been obtained legally, because this is the son we're talking about. There's not always a guarantee that they've done things entirely above board. As it turns out, they had. But this whole story, what does it tell us about the media, about politics, about men in power? Is there anything kind of? Well, first of all,
I'm going to say the behaviour is indefensible, and I don't think there's any way of looking for a route through this that kind of goes, oh well, you know, maybe. I think it's actually, this one is quite complicated about the legal thing, because the young guy in question was 16, which in Scotland is legal. Had this been England, I think it would not have been, because I think the age of consent in England is 18.
I'm not sure,
but I think it's So I think there's no defence for Derek Mackay. I think 270 messages, but also some of the messages, apparently he was saying things, and this is just between you and I, go, do you know what, get lost, you know. But I also understand the police are investigating, but at the moment they're saying there is no legal issue. I'm presuming if it had been me in that situation with my son, who's much older than this, I don't know if my first step would have been to go to the newspapers. I think I might have gone to the police. But I always had very, very open conversations with my son and his friends about age and consent and legality and all of that. So this boy, I would assume, I feel a certain amount of concern for the boy, because I'm sure there are people out there now trying to find, I mean, I don't know if his identity has actually been revealed or not. As a politician, I think I would have gone, we need to be very careful here because this boy's identity should be protected and the families. Is it legal to have getting these details? As a mother, I don't know that I would have gone to the press with this. I might have gone to the police, but if the police had said there's nothing we can do because there's nothing illegal happened, then I might have thought, well, what would my next step be? My next step is often to say people will contact your Member of Parliament. Contact your Member of Parliament, your MSP, your local councillors. But in my case, all of those are SNP. So then I might go, yeah, what will I get back from this? Because I'm really concerned. So then the next thing might be to go to the press. I don't know. I would never go to the Sun. I mean, it's a mission of mine when I'm in supermarkets to put all the Suns underneath the Times so that they don't. Sorry, did I just admit to a crime?
No, it's not a crime. No.
So that certainly wouldn't have gone to that paper, but I think there's no question. I think Derek Mackay is gone and should be gone. I think we need to look at how we feel or what we think in society about this idea of harassment, of 270 messages, and apparently the boy himself was going, do you know what, I'm really, could you stop? I just think it's a huge issue for everybody. I think people need to be trained about this. They need to be, people need to absolutely know from the get-go, I mean, as I've talked to my sons and his friends about, consent from really quite young, just because it's an issue. And we need to be talking to people from very young, so by the time they become finance secretary, he knows that he was doing something wrong. It's like, there's no question about that.
Yeah, you wouldn't be asking him to keep it quiet.
Yeah, and also, if you might, anybody might text somebody sort of going, do you know what, do you fancy going out for a drink or a dinner on a Friday night? They text you back and go, no thanks. You go, okay, carry on. But it's a kind of disgraceful. Men in power, anybody in power, but men particularly it tends to be, behaving like this and taking advantage of their position as a representative. Everybody who's in government is an elected representative of people. So to be using your position as somebody's representative to harass and abuse and insult them, to put their family in a very difficult situation is just, well, I think it's just appalling. And I kind of, I put my hand up, I vote SNP. And I'm pro-independence and all of that, but I think this is a big social issue for all of politics. In this case, it's for this party, and this man and this party to deal with quite clearly. But that would be the case whatever party it was. You have to deal with this, and you have to knock on it. And you maybe need to stand up and make a speech in Parliament and say, do you know what? In case anybody's wondering, this is what will happen to anybody who does this. So if you are considering texting or emailing somebody, some young person to harass them, I strongly advise against it because you will be out the door. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, it's not, this obviously is Derek Mackay, this is not a single party issue. This is a by and large a men's issue, and it is something that men, particularly men in power, really do need to address. On the plus side, Kate Forbes, I thought, stepped into the breach
I
marvellously. I find Kate Forbes very impressive, and I think it's been a really good moment for her to have this opportunity to really shine at such short notice. I think a lot of people in politics and in the SNP, in the Scottish Government, will have looked at that and seen why Kate Forbes is such a rising star. But anyway, we have to move on again, and we have election results in Ireland have started being counted today. The exit poll from the election is one of the closest anybody could possibly imagine. Fine Gael, who are the current government, got 22.4%. Sinn Féin got 22.3%. And Fianna Fáil, the other kind of traditional party of government in Ireland, got 22.2%. So this is all in an exit poll. Clearly, there will be some differences in the final results. Sinn Féin didn't stand as many candidates as the two larger parties, so they're not expected to have an equivalent number of MPs in the end. But this closeness, this surge for Sinn Féin that's brought them up to the same level as these two parties that have dominated Irish politics for 100 years. What do you think that says about Ireland today?
I suspect, again, all these things that I'm not an expert on, but hey, I suspect this is to do with how Brexit has changed the political landscape, but not necessarily in the way that people thought it would. I think it's quite possibly people of Ireland kind of going, well, actually, our Europeanness is important. This is an opportunity to maybe now we're in a situation where we can actually, because people don't ever vote for a party on just one issue. There's all sorts of things. And I imagine that people's feelings in Ireland are as complicated as people's feelings in Scotland. And it may well be that a lot of voters are now going, well, actually, the way things are at the moment, this is a possibility for a unified Ireland. So, whereas I wouldn't have in the past, I might just put my vote that way and see how that develops in terms of discussions in the Parliament. It depends of because I think was there not an increase in the nationalist vote in Northern Ireland as well for the pro-Ireland vote in Northern Ireland as well at the general election in December.
Yeah, the Unionists took a bit of a dive.
So it's I would think it's a possibility that people are going, well, do you know what? This is a chance, this is a moment in history where we might decide to do things a bit differently. And it might well be that a lot of people in Northern Ireland, it's quite an agricultural part of the country, all of that, who might well go, do you know what, bite the bullet, actually. Maybe to avoid all the misery that is going to come technically in terms of with Brexit, that maybe there is a feeling, and that this is a moment that we might actually find a way to progress and do things differently.
Of course, Sinn Féin during the campaign actually downplayed their policy for One Ireland. But I saw one person commenting that one of the valuable things about this might be that even once you account for all Sinn Féin's baggage, if they become a stronger party, then it turns Ireland into a more normal country that has a choice between left parties and right parties, as opposed to two sort of centre-right parties that their differences are basically they were on different sides of the Civil War 100 years ago. So there are people arguing that actually this is just Ireland essentially normalising its politics, which I think can only be a good thing. I think that one of the interesting things about whether there's going to be Irish unity is that it's becoming less a question of ethnic or religious identity and more, I think, with Brexit, as you say, is becoming more a practical question. It's not this deep-rooted historic injustices that have to be addressed. It's just, well, actually, the way we're governed doesn't work for us anymore, and we probably need to think about doing something different. which I think would be a really positive thing for Ireland.
But also, Ireland are going to be quite heavily involved in the Brexit, you know, through the EU with the Brexit negotiations, and so you know, so they've actually got cards in this game, and to have a role to play in that, in terms of saying, well, actually, we would maybe kind of not going to just kind of go through this. We would actually are wanting to kind of discuss and negotiate what's going to happen across that border, in which, however much people go, oh, we'll put a line down the middle of the Irish Sea, or in the middle of you can put a line across the front of the moon. It's still going to have to be aligned, you know. And so again, it's one of these things. Just at this moment in all of us's history, it's very complicated, and it's been promoted. This whole thing has been promoted all the time as being, oh, it's just really simple, yes or no. Well, actually, it just isn't, because there's so many people and so many countries. And actually, you know, for most of those countries who are in the EU and all that kind of European identity actually probably is quite relaxing compared to the tensions of a Europe before that. And I guess Ireland is similar to that. Within there's the Republic, Northern Ireland, and the all the United Kingdom. Maybe we just don't want to go back to that state of constantly living in tension. We prefer, you know, we want to embrace that more relaxed thing where we just do shit and, you know.
Yeah. Anyway, we are running very short of time, so just very quickly, we had 3 polls this week showing independence in Scotland at 51%. There's the first time, I think, ever that there's been consecutive polls showing a majority for independence. What's your reaction to that? Do you think this is a page being turned, and this is the things are only going to move in one direction now, or do you think there's still a lot of discussion to come?
I think it depends. I think it depends what comes up in the Westminster budget. How they manipulate their budget to affect the Scottish Government budget. I think it depends on what the love song to Scotland is actually going to be, what the lyrics of that are going to be. I suspect a lot of it is to do, because go on social media a lot and kind of listen to the, you know, and I think a lot of it's actually to do with people saying, do you know what, whatever we choose, we'll choose, thank you. So the idea, I think, I hear more and more people kind of going, the sense of, they're not necessarily, I'm not necessarily kind of pro-independence, but I think it should be up to me to say. So I think there's an element of that. And I think also, actually, so many of the arguments against independence have been dismantled. And Westminster has behaved so, I mean, from the moment that David Cameron stepped out at 7:30 in the morning on the 19th of September to say, let's talk about evil. You kind of go, I was sitting watching the television, I stayed up all night, kind of went, and I think you just blew it, David. I think you just blew it, because if at that moment there had been real openness and generosity, if after the Brexit vote there had been real openness and generosity and genuine involved conversation about how complex and divided those votes were, then I think things would have gone a lot better. But now I think people are actually kind of going, you know, fuck it, we can't actually be much worse off. See, Blair McDougall still wants to constantly shout at the SNP, and everybody's constantly shouting and kind of go, oh, well, what about the pound and all that? Do you know what? There comes a point where people go, but you have already put me in an underground cell.
How much worse can it get?
Do you really think that closing the window makes that much difference now? Because you haven't been prepared to go, you know, come my brother, whatever. And the profound psychological thing, I think, often within Scottish people is, I mean, it's not even that profound. It's just, don't you tell me what to do. I can go and get a kick in on my own. I don't need, do you know what I mean? And I think a lot of that is to do with that, and that is a kind of, you know, and also, you know, the Willie Rennies of this world kind of shouting, we absolutely oppose another referendum. You go, well, you know, I think I said to you before, if I put that question to you, would you give up devolution to avoid independence, yes or no? And there might well be more people who are going, no.
No.
So I've now made that wee half step, so now maybe just go the whole way.
Yeah.
Do you know?
Well, we will obviously keep watching all of these stories as they develop, but that is all we've got time for today. So I'd like to thank Jeanette very much for joining us. It's always a pleasure. And we'd like to thank you for joining us at home as well. It's always a pleasure to have an audience for this show. We would like to ask you, if you are able to support us, we talked a bit about this earlier, but there's so much that Broadcasting Scotland would love to be able to do if we had the budget. If we had, you know, if we had a license fee that you had to pay on fear of going to jail, there's so much more we could do here. But we're not threatening to put you in jail. We're just asking you to do it out of the goodness of your heart. Please do go to broadcastingscotland.scot/register. Sign up as a supporter. Your £5 a month will make a big, big difference to what we're able to achieve here. As we said earlier, there's a plan to do a kind of question time type show, which we'd love to get on the road. We also will be covering, as we have been covering all the marches, all the All Under One banner marches. There's other events around the country we'd love to be able to cover. There's all kinds of things that we could do if we had the money. So please, yeah, there's things in the works just now, and all of them are going to be much easier and happen much sooner the more money we have. If you're not able to support us financially, don't feel bad about it. The shows will always be free to view online at broadcastingscotland.scot. But if you want to help, you can share the show around on social media, or just tell your friends about us. Let them know that you watch Broadcasting Scotland, you enjoy the shows, and you think they should watch too. Building a bigger audience is always going to help us as well. So that's pretty much all we've got time for today. So once again, thanks to Jeanette.
Thank you.
I've been Kenny McBride. Have a great rest of your Sunday.
Thank you.